Hey guys, this episode we're going to be talking about Meilisearch and how to use it for indexing and searching your records in your Rails application. Now this is similar to Elasticsearch, where it's a separate service that you run that will index and do all kinds of awesome stuff for your searches. Pagisearch, Ransack, those can run on your database without a separate service, but they're kind of limited in various situations that you might need. And so using something like Meilisearch is actually really, really powerful to be able to provide strong, complex search functionality that is fine-tunable in many different ways. So we've recently upgraded the GoRails search for this. It's really fast, and you can even type words wrong, like we'll say performane instead of performance, and we can run that query. And it's super fast, much faster than our previous version, because it's going to now search two things, the episodes and the forum threads. And the forum threads actually we want the forum thread to be returned, but we do want to search all of the forum post bodies. And that was something that wasn't very efficient or easy to do with prioritizing the title over the forum post bodies with Pagisearch, and that's one of the reasons why we've upgraded to using Meilisearch here. So there's a lot of improvements and fine tweaks that we can do to make this work really nice with Meilisearch that just isn't really possible in other methods sometimes. So let's take a look at how to add this to your Rails application. First things first, you're going to need to install Meilisearch. On a Mac, you can run brew install Meilisearch, but you can follow their install guides to install it for your operating system. Then you're going to want to run Meilisearch server. So it's going to tell you what what port it's listening on, and you'll be able to actually pull that up and test out your search index and everything with a search right here, which is really cool. So if you want to index things, test out your search, see if it's returning good results, you can play with all of that without even having to write code to render the results or pay attention to any of those things. You can actually test it out right here in development, which is a really, really handy feature. So from here, we need to install the Meilisearch Rails gem so that we can interact with it in our Rails app. This is a layer on top of the Meilisearch Ruby gem, which connects Ruby directly as a client to the Meilisearch server. The Rails integration builds on top of that and adds active record functionality. So we can go in and build an application like this, where we have restaurants that have names, cuisines, descriptions, and also reviews in an associated model, and we can make a search for our restaurants that will search all of these things. Plus, we can filter, we can sort, and have all of that taken care of by Meilisearch itself. So let's dig in to actually building out search in our restaurant example here. So let's go ahead and add the gem to our gem file. It's Meilisearch Rails. And I've already got that added to our gem file. And then the next piece is we want to configure the Meilisearch host and API key. And also, you may want to define the pagination backend if you're using Kaminari or will paginate. If you're using Pagi, you don't need to define that as the pagination backend because Pagi can handle it on its own separately. The other thing you might want to configure is the timeout or max retries. This can be useful in production, so if it had an error for some random reason, you could actually retry it and hopefully that would succeed. And you can configure the timeout as well. It should be fast, but in case there was ever something wrong where it took a second, you could at least have a 2-second timeout in that case. So I'm going to paste these in here. You can change this to whatever you need. In our case, we're in development, but you might want to say rails.application.credentials.meilisearch and host or something like that. Meilisearch _host, whatever you want to call that key. And then you can go and have those referencing something that can be different for staging, for production, and so on. So now let's go into our application. We've got the seeds that are going to generate 1,000 restaurants with different names, cuisines, descriptions, and we will have 5 to 10 reviews for each one of those. We want to be able to search our restaurants and the reviews as we go through that. So that's what we want to do. So let's open the restaurant model. To set up Meilisearch, we want to include Meilisearch Rails inside of here. And then we want to define the Meilisearch block. Now you can also pass in options here, so you can say if or unless, so you could skip records or include records depending on some method call or attribute that you have defined. We don't have anything that we need for that, but I wanted to point that out. And inside of the Meilisearch block, we define primarily the attributes that we want to have index. So here we want to say we have an attribute for the name. We have our attributes for the cuisine, the description, and we're probably going to also want our, created at or updated at records in here too, but it depends on how you want to use these things. If you don't actually want to search on the created at or updated at, maybe you don't need them as attributes because those are going to be available for everything by default. So Meilisearch has field types that we can look at in their documentation. So if we look for the field properties, there are searchable attributes, sortable attributes, displayed attributes, and different types like that you can define. So what's really cool about this is that we have the searchable attributes, which we can define that are ones we can search on, but displayed attributes are ones that are returned in the results. So maybe you have searchable attributes that aren't visible in the results, or maybe vice versa, results that are visible that aren't searchable. So you can do a combination of those things, and you can also tell it how attributes are filterable or sortable. And in our case, we probably want our created at and updated at to be sortable attributes, and we can define those here and say sortable attributes and give it an array of our attributes, updated at, and we can define those. Now, the cuisine here, we want to probably be a filterable attribute, so we can say filterable attributes, put cuisine in there, and that should be plural, and that's going to allow us to filter on the cuisine attribute and say, hey, we only want results of that cuisine or two types of cuisine. So let's dig into the Rails console and index the records that we have. So we can say restaurant.reindex bang, and that's going to load all of the records out of our database and send them over to Meilisearch. And if we load up the Meilisearch web UI, you'll see that we have hits about 1,000. Time spent searching with no query here was 8 milliseconds. We can type in something in here like comfortable, and we can search that. 80 hits, 21 milliseconds, boom, super fast. We can do all kinds of things with this where we can say, like, we want to look for only bars, for example. And in our application, we can go and set up that filter so that we can have the bar results as the only results. So in the Rails console, we can write our queries. We can use the restaurant model, and we can call ms_search to call the Meilisearch search method. This will also be aliased to search, which you can use as well, as long as there wasn't any other method named search when this loaded up. So we can use ms_search directly or search. This is optional in case it was to conflict with another search method or service that you might have on your active record model. So with this, we can actually pass in our search terms. So we could say like loyalty and search the restaurants for anything that mentions loyalty in the description, the name, the cuisine, and you can see that our faker data has the exact same thing for all of these records. So that gives you the results here. We can also go through and we can say restaurant search loyalty, or let's do the filter, and we will say filter where the cuisine equals Indian. And if we pass that in there, we will get the Indian cuisine restaurants that have loyalty written in one of those attributes. Now, the other thing you can do as well, this isn't actually going to affect our results because we did a DB seed and all the created at and updated timestamps are exactly the same. But you can add your sort order in here. So if it's one of those sortable attributes like created at, we can say descending here, and that's going to allow us to descend the created at values and sort these results. So this is super useful for building out any sort of index page that has filters and sorting and all of that. This is exactly what you would want for all of those use cases where the user can fine tune how they interact with that set of results. So this is good, and brings us to the next thing where we want to actually search reviews as well. So if we have our attribute for reviews, we can't just use that directly because that's going to give active record models back, and this attribute for Meilisearch actually needs to be something a little bit more of a regular variable type, like a string or an array or a hash, in order to take those and index them. So what we want to do here is we actually want to say reviews pluck body. So it's going to give us an array of strings back for our text body for all of those reviews, and then it's going to index that underneath the Meilisearch restaurant, and we can have those included. But what do we do now, where we have the reviews that we've added to this configuration, but Meilisearch doesn't know about all of that new data? Well, we want to go back to our model here in the console, and we want to say reindex bang. So it's going to go and load. We'll actually need to reload the code there. And now you're going to see that the reviews are being loaded for every one of those when it gets indexed. Now we're reindexing everything, so it's loading everything out of the database, but when you have the Meilisearch block here, it's going to hook into your callbacks so that it can sync new records, updated records, and destroyed records to the Meilisearch database so that those get updated accordingly and your search results match what are in your database. So now we can index, or we have indexed, and we can look at a review and say, let's look for anything that has ample seating mentioned in it. We can say restaurant.search ample seating, and we're going to end up with results that have that mentioned in one of the records. So it won't be ample seating mentioned in any of the attributes that you see here. It will actually be in the results that you see in the reviews. So that is a great handy feature for being able to combine your models together in your search indexes. And then the order of these is kind of what takes precedence over each other. So you can organize the order of your fields here, or your attributes, into the order that you have for priorities. So if it matches the name first, then the cuisine, then the description, then the reviews, you have the priority of, if that word or search term is in the name, we want that to be returned higher ranking than something that mentions it in a review. So that can be really useful for basically tweaking your search results and prioritizing the stuff that you think is going to be the strongest indicator of a good match to what the user searched for. A good example of that is if we were to look for something that mentions sushi. We have some with the name sushi in them, but we also have some where the cuisine is sushi. If we were to say restaurant.search sushi, what we're going to see is we're going to see results with sushi in the name before we see anything with cuisine as sushi. So this is only returning the first 20 results to be fast, and that is not even made it through all of the results with sushi in the name. So it's prioritizing that in order. Now, one thing I want to mention here is that when we do a search, you see an array of objects back from our database, but this actually is a result object that is an array, but it has the raw answer method on it. So it's kind of trying to mimic the Rails active record collection that you get back, but you also get the raw answer that you can look at that is actually the JSON that comes back from Meilisearch. So here you get all this information back about what you searched. You get the NB hits, which is the number of hits that it estimates, the time processing in milliseconds, the limit that we limited to 20 results by default, and you can customize the limit and offset so that it works with pagination, which is really, really handy. So the Pagey, Kaminari, and Will paginate options are all there. You can connect them up. It's really easy to use any of those. We actually patched the Pagey one, or got that fixed because we found a bug in it, and that is now working as well. And you can wire that up easily in your browser. So let's go to our index for our restaurants controller. And we will say, instead of doing restaurant.all, let's say restaurant.search or Meilisearch params query. And we will have those find 20 results for us. So if we go to our index HTML for restaurants, somewhere on the page here, we can do a search field. We can say form with URL, restaurants path, method here is get, do form, and then we want a form.search field query, and we can have a form.button to submit that. So we'll say search. So that's going to give us on our search page here. The search, we're going to need to make sure that we have our Meilisearch configured. I haven't restarted this server since we defined that. So we'll reboot. We'll have our search here. We can search for, say, Thai, and it's going to find all of our Thai results. Our sushi, as you can see, grabs all the sushi ones. And we can then go add pagination, like Pagey, to this in order to display the next set of pages with the same query in the result. Now, to use Pagey with Meilisearch, there's an extra that you can require. You just add this to your initializer. I've already done that. We've already got Pagey installed. You have to pick one of two options for using Pagey. So you can use the Meilisearch yourself, pass that in, the offset and limits yourself, and you have to calculate those. Or you can use the active mode and let Pagey do the calculation of offset and limit for you. So this is basically going to let you do the search. You have full control over it. You take the results, you give it to Pagey, and it spits back out the Pagey object. Or you can have Pagey run the search and then convert the results into that automatically. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the Pagey search version here that we use in our controller. So I'm going to go into the restaurant.rb. We're going to add the Pagey Meilisearch module in here, and then we can go into our restaurants controller and change this over to Pagey search. And this is our restaurants, but in this case, we want it to actually be just a local variable here, and then let Pagey Meilisearch take care of it. So we'll say restaurants, and then we can say Pagey at restaurants here. Restaurants, and items we want to be 20 or maybe 25. And as long as you've added Pagey to the page, you can go to your application, you can search for Pagey. Make sure that you've required this and restarted your Rails server. I have not restarted my Rails server. So once we do that, we can see that we'll have all of our results, and they still start with sushi. If we go to the next page, we're going to see sushi still in the names, but as we keep going, Silverbox doesn't have sushi in the name, and it's in the cuisine. So it's starting to filter those out where the cuisine matches next, and so on. And it will continue going down into the reviews and everything like that. So we have our sort order out of the box having the rankings of the search results as best matches first. So that is how to set up Meilisearch in your application. There's a lot more you can do with it. You can add those hiding and showing from your indexes. You can make more complex configurations for your indexing and so on. There's a lot of other cool things that you can do with that. But if you want to just get started with it, it's really easy to set up, really easy, really fast to run. And from my experience, it has been great so far. So I'm really excited to use this in production on Go Rails to power your search. So pretty soon you'll be able to search for Meilisearch here and check out how it works behind the scenes. So that's it for this episode. I will talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.